On the amalgamation argument, so argument for amalgamation of district boundaries, the current district boundary system, particularly in urban areas, is inefficient. Many districts in rural areas have limited resources that hinder the delivery of essential services like healthcare, education, and sanitation. Merging smaller districts will enhance service delivery by pooling resources and expertise. So that is for those who say amalgamation works. And I was giving an example of in Accra, you know, if you say you're going to have 33 mayors in Accra. Currently, even when a street light falls, you know, you don't even know who is responsible. So can you imagine adding a layer to the bureaucracy? You know, a mayor that must have his cabinet and all of those kinds of things. You have more people there, but the development issue will still be a challenge. And some people have said, you know, really, the way Accra is now, you can think of Accra, you can parcel it in maybe 4, you know, Accra West, you know, going into your Dansuman, Weja, you know, that area. Actually, people live their lives in that zone anyway. And those who are in the east part, going to Oyarifa, Dodowa, all these kinds of places, Accra Central, which now is like your AMA, there you can have Tema as another. So maybe 4 or 5, it's much more sensible for you to have 4 mayors or 5 mayors in Accra than 33 mayors in Accra. And I think you can say the same for Kumasi and so on. Those who are against amalgamation, amalgamation could weaken governance by making local administration less accessible. You remember that even the creation of regions was driven by the idea that if you have your own region, you are able to access more resources. So people feel that if you take that away, then they will be denied resources. And then financial empowerment efforts should focus on strengthening district capacity by giving them more resources to enhance. So that if the issue is, or some people think the issue is just not enough resources going to local government, and that's why we are not seeing the development issue. And then the rural-urban divide, it may marginalize rural areas by redistributing resources to urban areas, leaving rural communities even more overlooked. And then some people talked about job losses, right? So that's the debate around amalgamation. Proportional representation also came up, which I understand has also come up at the CRC. Citizens are in favor of proportional representation at district level for women, youth, persons with disability, and other marginalized groups in local assemblies. So some fishermen in the coastal districts express the need for the representation of fishermen at the local level. Proportional representation should not result in symbolic representation. Competency must be ensured if proportional representation for the marginalized is implemented. And then competition. The percentage for marginalized group is not to be appointed, but they must compete through elections. And so these are some of the sentiments, but proportional representation at local government level is one of the issues that people seem to support. So in terms of recommendations, implementing the election of MMDCs with strong consideration for non-partisanship. So again, in all our engagement, people still want non-partisan election of mayors. And then consider pilot tests to tackle logistical challenges before nationwide implementation. Address resource allocation concerns before considering district amalgamation, particularly in rural and in the northern regions. And then implement proportional representation to ensure seats for women, youth, PWDs, and marginalized groups in the local assembly. I don't think chiefs came into the conversation, even though I know that's one area that has been raised. So that's for local government. For constitutional reform, one of the questions that were posed was the Council of State. Abolishing the Council of State seems to be quite popular for some people. So those in favor of abolishing the Council of State, many participants advocated for the abolition of the Council of State due to its purely advisory role and a lack of impact on governance. So people are basically looking at more recent issues around the Council of State and saying they are not making the difference that it was set up to do. The Council of State selection process was seen as lacking transparency and was often viewed as partisan rather than neutral. Then there was recommendations for reforming. So the other alternative is reforming the Council of State. People want reform of the selection process, limiting the president appointment powers, and for more authority to be given to the Council of State to move beyond solely an advisory role. And the selection of the Council of State should be merit-based. So one of the issues on constitutional reform was on Council of State. The second one was the appointment of ministers from Parliament. So the argument against the appointment of ministers from Parliament, conflict of interest, people are concerned that MPs who are ministers focus more on the government work, leave the Parliament work, and is not therefore not able to check the actions of the executive. And then they raised the separation of powers issue. Participants were concerned that dual roles of MPs weaken checks and balances between the branches of government. So limiting or abolishing appointment of ministers from Parliament to strengthen the separation of powers, improve oversight, and boost ministerial performance. So generally, I think one can say that most people think that this separation between the dual roles of MP and minister should be one of the changes that should happen. We also asked a question around presidential and parliamentary term limits. So for presidential term limits, some participants supported a longer term for policy implementation, while others favored a shorter term to boost accountability. But across all regions, the majority of participants agreed that the current 4-year term with a maximum, agreed to the current 4-year term with a maximum of 2 terms. Some people even said 1 term. It's enough. Then parliamentary term limits, some participants expressed the view that the term limits should be established for the MPs with a suggestion of a maximum of 3 terms. However, others, particularly participants from Cape Coast, Bono East, opposed term limits, arguing that experienced MPs help maintain parliamentary productivity. I don't know what's happening in Cape Coast, Bono, and Bono East, but maybe their MPs are doing well, are performing. But so that's the view on those issues. So for the policy recommendation, reform the Council of State to reduce presidential appointment powers and ensure diverse, merit-based, non-partisan selection. Limit or abolish the appointment of MPs as ministers to strengthen separation of powers. Maintain the current 4-year presidential term as we know it. Anti-corruption. So we did talk about oral. So the many participants backed the oral initiative, particularly to recover assets from corruption, and recommended expanding it to districts and communities to curb grassroots corruption as well. There were concerns over the effectiveness of oral. Concerns were raised about oral's risks of politicization, given its lack of posterior powers and overlapping a sort of mandate with other anti-corruption issues. So those concerns are there. At the time we're doing it, oral has not been handed over to the Attorney General. So it'll be interesting to see what people still think about the oral issue. So I think the sentiment generally, law enforcement and sanctions on anti-corruption, recovery of stolen public assets, provision of preventive opportunities to combat corruption, and removing presidential immunity from corruption investigation. So that's one of the things people think that the president should not have immunity from corruption, and something that we should be looking at. I think I've gone over this. Education. So the education conversation was generally around financing. I think even at the dialogue, a lot of the conversation was, how are we sustaining the financing of all these commitments that we are making? If you look at what has happened with the free SHS, it's, the impact on basic education, which is like the foundation for, for education quality, is one of the things that people have been concerned about. So the sentiments was that participants from various regions overwhelmingly agreed that basic education should receive greater priority and increased allocation of resources. I don't know if Kofi Asare is here, but or anybody from EduWatch, but I think, I think generally now if you're thinking of allocation percentage, it's almost 50-50 between basic and secondary, right? It's wider. It's widening. Okay, so all right. So the sentiments is that we are neglecting basic education, but how do you build a high rise with a very poor foundation? Right? Basic education suffers from poor infrastructure and a lack of learning materials. Weak foundation at the basic level lead to poor literacy at the basic, and then hinders success in higher education. And then there were concerns about the free SHS policy, the quality of implementation. More funding is needed, and issues need to be fixed before expansion. And then they suggested that parents may need to share more of the cost. So, it's back to government. This idea about what we should do with the free SHS policy. Citizens are saying we should look at the cost issue. Maybe let parents be able to take some of the costs. Improving teacher conditions in rural areas by providing electricity, water, classrooms and materials, financial incentives for teachers posted in rural areas, and the provision of accommodation for teachers near the schools in rural areas, community-based training in teacher education program. So I think there's a big sentiment that, the distribution of teachers generally across the country in rural areas is a problem, and because there's a lot of the infrastructure that's needed to keep them there is not there, and we need to find a way to close that gap. So the recommendations we put together, we should prioritize resource allocation to basic education, to establish proper learning foundation, address quality concerns in free SHS policy before extending it further, provide comprehensive incentives for teachers in rural areas, including improved accommodation, financial incentives, and resource material. This is not new. This is just the same thing we've talked about for many years. Enhance technical and vocational training to address youth unemployment, strengthen implementation of inclusive education policies for children with disabilities. Elections, cost of elections or cost of politics. And I think one of the discussions was really whether we should have a defined campaign period. There was a general agreement on the need for a defined and limited campaign period. Suggestions for the duration varied from 3 months to 6 months. And the background to this is simple. If, based on the CDD work we have done since 2018, if you have presidential elections that at the minimum is costing you $100 million, and that was like 2022 $100 million. But that was 2022, so we know it's double now, right? Yeah, so, and then for MP, you're looking at $600,000, including, how they say, nurturing your constituency and all of those things, primaries and elections. When you look at those kinds of monies, it's mind-boggling. So if an MP comes into government and they have to recoup all of that money, there's no way corruption is going to be stopped. So we need to really look at even the time we campaign, because as soon as election ends, already the campaign has started. We know there's already a thank you tour that's going. And the next campaign is already started. In many countries, even in places like Senegal and so on, you have a very set campaign period. You will not see posters and billboards of politicians until the official campaign period starts. But in our case, billboards are left because there's already an intention to campaign for the next 4 years. And they will be there in our medians and so on for the next 4 years. Nobody takes them off. So we need to look at that as well. Participants had mixed views on subsidizing political parties through the Electoral Commission support, because I think party financing has also been an issue, that if almost everybody that is contesting for election, particularly the parties, are governments in waiting, then we shouldn't be treating them as some private entity that organizes their own thing and then they come into government. If they come with the wrong attitude and approach, we are all going to suffer. So the issue is that then maybe the state must contribute to creating this environment where we can reduce the use of money in politics. So there were mixed views. So those who support, some support to political parties, or let's say candidates for elections, they say it would ensure fairness in internal elections. Some suggested abolishing election fees altogether to ensure fairer participation. Those who again says that politicians will misuse the public funds. So they don't think. And some of the ideas that have been put to, that it might not even be that you are giving money to political parties, but that, if the Electoral Commission goes to supervise internal party elections, and that you must make it mandatory that they supervise internal party elections, they don't charge. So that it's almost a subsidy for the party, right? So there is a support in kind to reduce the cost, even if political parties want to have a meeting at the Great Hall or wherever it is, the use of spaces, and these are all reduce the cost of politics, and we can look at those kinds of support. So the recommendations: implement a transparent campaign financing regulations requiring public disclosure of all contributions, establishing reasonable spending caps, consider implementing a limited campaign period varying from 3 to 6 months. On youth development and economy, what actions should be taken to increase youth employment? Investing in agriculture was seen as one of the key avenues for jobs, food security. Calls were made to modernize practices and boost training to attract the youth. The young people were very interested in agriculture, but some of the basic things were like, where can they even go if they want information? If I'm a young person and I'm interested in agriculture, can I walk to my district assembly, to an office, and say, I'm interested? Where can you give me all the resources, how to acquire land, how to get these inputs? There's no place that they can go to get all this information, but they are interested. They even want to put themselves into groups to be able to do this work. So there were a lot of interest, and I think it's one that government should take an interest. Entrepreneurship: participants stressed the need for youth business support through lower loan rates and reduced small business taxes. Technical and vocational training: participants saw strong youth job potential in technical fields and urged more investment in TVET and apprenticeship. Also, domestic food production, manufacturing and value addition to local industries was also one of the reasons they gave for supporting. Then on Galamsey, what should be done about Galamsey? Our town halls in Central and Western region, residents raised concerns about Galamsey's harmful effect, including environmental damage and water pollution. ban or declare a state of emergency. That was what we were hearing. And then reclamation of destroyed lands as actions that should be taken. So we are saying consider temporary mining bans or state of emergency declaration, rehabilitate affected farmlands and water bodies, develop coordinated land use management between government and landowners. On state-owned enterprises, the sentiments that came out of the deliberations were, one, MPs should not be allowed to sit on boards of SOEs. I think we've been talking about it over and over again, and we really need to get to that decision around the role of MPs sitting on boards. Boards and director appointments should be based on merit and competency, not party affiliation. Members of the ruling party should get or should not get first picks of appointments. Joseph, please make it, Danoye is here so that she doesn't take the wrong information back. So should not get, if you say should get, then the people will take the wrong message. So members of ruling party should not get first pick of board appointments. Then the policy recommendation, implement selective privatization of appropriate SOEs and list privatized SOEs on stock exchange to enable public investment. Establish transparent and merit-based board appointment processes, prohibit MPs and sitting politicians from serving on SOE boards, and require asset declaration from SOE board members and executives. So, currently you still have SOE CEOs who are also still executive members of their party, and still holding those two portfolios. And we've had this discussion in the past about, the separating government from party and how those kinds of roles, dual roles, make it difficult. So it's something we need to look at. Our specialized town hall forum for women, women representation, so law like the Affirmative Action Act face major implementation challenges. A legal framework and enforcement is needed to ensure the 30% quota for women in political roles is met. And then it was also emphasized that CSOs and other stakeholders should prioritize engaging and empowering young girls through education and training. Issues affecting women, there was a discussion about the government's sanitary pads initiative that was praised, but concerns were raised about its implementation. A strong monitoring system was recommended with a focus on reaching rural schools. It was recommended that government should support locally manufactured pads to reduce costs and support national businesses. Maternity leave, concerns were raised on the issues of workplace competition, which sometimes leads to the displacement of women from their professional positions after maternity leave. And then childcare facilities near workplaces would help women balance work and childcare without extended leave. Then women economic empowerment and agriculture. Participants emphasized the need for economic opportunities to be based on merit rather than political affiliation to ensure fairness and inclusivity. And then concerns were also raised about regulatory barriers to financial access. Women face challenges securing farmlands as landowners often reclaim it after higher yields. So there are certain experiences, particularly in rural areas, where we need to pay attention to. And the fair land tenure system was recommended to protect women's long-term access. So in terms of recommendations, establish legal framework and enforcement mechanism for 30% quota for women in political appointments, improve implementation of the sanitary pad distribution with strong monitoring mechanisms and focus on rural schools, create comprehensive support systems for victims of gender-based violence, including shelters, counseling, legal aid, the establishment of the Women Development Bank with efficient mechanisms that transcends political regimes, reform land tenure system to protect women farmers' rights to land. Okay, I'm getting to the end now. So persons with disability, one of the issues around stigma and inclusivity. I think you have to say it louder because I'm not repeating it. Okay, so first, the lack of disaggregated data on PWDs hinder policies from addressing specific disability needs. So data is important. PWDs face stigma in some communities. Education campaigns and support from traditional and religious leaders can help break cultural barriers. And then persons with albinism face community restrictions. We had the Albinism Association represented at the forum, and they made a lot of contributions. And then also parents of children with disabilities need state-backed training and support. And actually, I mean, their situation is very, very, very bad. I mean, and it's an area that we really need to pay attention to, because even as we talk about disability, sometimes we forget that we have people that have to care for people with autism and other kinds, and there's really no support, no state support at all for that group, because they are not directly persons with disability. But they have to sacrifice all their time and life to ensure that their children, are taken care of. And the state doesn't really provide any support. So we met the association there as well, and I think that's an important area. And then healthcare must end professional stigma and better serve PWDs with regular staff evaluations on disability issues. So that's more in the labor front and, how we implement these policies. Employment, it was noted that employment policies tend to favor PWDs with formal education, rejection of qualified PWDs from working in governmental institutions. On healthcare issues with medical coverage, most facilities are not disability friendly. Public space accessibility, participants express their challenges with accessibility to public transport. And then the free tertiary education implementation, PWDs struggle to access tertiary education due to limited implementation of inclusive policies. Free education often excludes private institutions. Assistive devices are insufficient. Campuses lack accessibility, and medical proof requirements can be a barrier. So I think government's policy, I think that the tertiary, I think that's a full payment for tuition for persons with disability. I mean, some of those things will come and help in this area. So generally, collect and maintain disaggregated data on PWDs to inform targeted policies, launch nationwide anti-stigma campaign, and engage traditional leaders as change agents, enforce the mandated 5% employment reservation for PWDs in government agencies, increase the District Assembly Common Fund allocation to 5%. I think it's 5% already. It's 3. Oh, it's been reduced. Okay. All right. And then improve distribution based on actual PWD needs. Enhance specialized medical coverage to include more disabilities and improve healthcare facilities aimed at PWDs. And then enforce compliance with Ghana accessibility standards for built environments. And that's, I mean, sometimes when you look at some of these ramps, even able-bodied people cannot go up the ramp, let alone persons with disability. Because and I think somebody was asking me, where can you find the measurements, if you're building a ramp. It should be something that should be common. Like you can go on a website and get all the measurements and so on. So some of this information dissemination is really important to help ease the burden on persons with disability. Now, the elderly. So on healthcare, challenges accessing quality healthcare due to gaps in the National Health Insurance Scheme. Then the healthcare remains largely inaccessible for the elderly, especially in rural areas with few mobile clinics or home-based care options. Seniors also lack support through local health programs such as free screenings, food aid, daycare center, and local health care. And then healthcare workers often lack training to address senior-specific needs, including communication. On Social Security and pension, elderly citizens face financial insecurity due to weak pension systems, limited work opportunities, and poor access to financial services. Many lack access to dedicated pension funds, especially those outside formal employment. They also face barriers to continued employment with few part-time options and limited private sector inclusion. And I can say that these days, when you consider that people are doing remote working and people have been born before computer, so that option, even where part-time may be available, you cannot really even utilize that as well. Financial planning support is minimal, and retirees often face age-based loan discrimination. Yes, if you are a certain age, you can't access any credit. So people have already declared that you are on your way. So they will come. They don't want to take any risk coming to take their money back. On the economy, older citizens face limited support for economic participation with few policies enabling senior entrepreneurship. That's interesting. Seniors also lack formal representation as there is no advisory board to advocate their retraining or re-engagement in the workforce. Infrastructure and accessibility, elderly citizens face barrier in public transport and space access. Public spaces are often poorly designed for elderly needs with inadequate seating, inaccessible footbridges, buildings that fail to meet accessibility standards, including restrooms, staircases, which are unsuitable for seniors. And the special town hall forum for the youth on employment and education, young people face limited access to skills training and employment opportunities, especially in underserved areas. Youth employment programs are often not inclusive or widespread. Job creation policies lack regular input from key stakeholders, weakening their effectiveness. Small and medium enterprises also face inadequate support with limited funding and few incentives to grow. On constitutional review and youth participation, citizens face unequal application of the law and limited access to justice. Legal literacy efforts are insufficient, and unchecked executive powers undermine democratic accountability. So that's what the youth are saying, that nobody is, we say we are equal before the law, but some are equal than others. So they want the Constitutional Review Committee to look at it. And then also literacy. We are not all lawyers, but it seems like sometimes when the conversation is going, if you are not a lawyer, you can't understand it. So how do we improve legal literacy all around so we can assert our rights? Strengthen and make accessible skills training programs regardless of locality. Increase funding and incentives for SMEs led by young entrepreneurs. Decentralize the school feeding program to regional levels and align with local food production cycles. I was in Tamale and I was like, this absolutely makes sense, because the lady who made this intervention was basically saying, Why is it that everybody who is doing the school feeding program have to eat rice or, a certain type of food everywhere across the country? Because in the north, there are certain seasons for maize, there are certain seasons, and because when the seasons are there, the food is cheaper, so the menu should reflect the production cycle so that it's cheaper for government, to be able to provide, meals that are nutritious for the citizens. Rather than this everywhere, same sort of food, which then tends to be expensive because we have to go and import rice or do this and so on and so forth. So they were saying that we should decentralize the school feeding program to regional levels and align with local food production cycles. And then prioritize student loan over allowances for more timely financial support, create meaningful spaces for youth participation in governance and decision-making processes. Young people are really interested in engaging. And we have to find a systemic way of keeping them engaged so that they can contribute to development. So lastly, just a few points on in terms of our conclusion. The discussions highlight a strong citizen desire for more accountable, transparent, and inclusive governance structures that address Ghana's national and development challenges. They reveal widespread concerns about corruption, with citizens demanding stronger accountability mechanisms and effective enforcement. Constitutional reforms, particularly regarding the Council of State, the dual role of MPs as ministers, were prominently discussed, with many participants advocating for clearer separation of powers. Citizens expressed the need for reforming the Council of State to enhance transparency, effectiveness, and accountability. And the town hall meetings also showed strong support for electing MMDs, DCs, making politics less costly and more transparent. People want better funding for primary schools, improved teaching in rural areas, and fixes to free SHS before expanding it. To support youth, there were calls for more investment in farming, skills training, youth businesses. Forums for women, youth, and the elderly and persons with disability highlighted for the need for fair representation, better health care, job opportunities, and stronger systems. Thank you very, very, very much. It's been a long conversation, but we wanted to, as much as possible, capture everything that was discussed.
Thank you, Dr. Kojo Asante, for giving us the findings from the various town hall meetings that we had. Fortunately for us, the various institutions that will lead the implementation of the findings are with us here, and I believe the notes that they have taken, they will use that to help develop and implement policies to address the concerns from Ghanaians. So where we are now, we have to get feedback from all of us here on the findings that she presented. So we are ready for your comments and questions. Please, you mention your name and the institution, then the question follows. Okay, so Daniel, you can take the microphone round. If you have any question or comment from the findings that Dr. Kojo Asante gave, kindly let us know. Okay, Daniel, send the microphone now.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Eusi Akon. I'm the National Youth Organizer for the People's National Convention.